The Meta in Music, a musician's guide to Gödel, Escher, Bach and Eternal Golden Braid. Lecture 3, Translations, Isomorphisms and Sonifications. Our broadly defined theme of meta-music covers 3 categories. Music about music, or music that contains other music. Music that goes beyond or transcends conventional music itself. And music that operates on multiple levels or has multiple meanings. In this last category, Bach's art of the fugue fits. If you recall from Lecture 2, Bach placed his own name into the counter-subject, so the music both contained melody and Bach's signature. So we'll include this idea of encoding other information into music as part of our meta-music theme. You might recall Bach's cryptogram, BACH, spells in the German notation system this gloriously chromatic melody. And this motif was used by Bach, but also many other composers in dedication to him. From Schumann's 6 fugues on the name of Bach, to Liszt's austere fantasy and fugue. To Poulenc's charming and very French waltz. And to Arvo Pärt's collage, where the 4 letters are used as key areas and stretched across a wide expanse of musical time. Let's interrogate this further. What we have is the language of written letters, A through H, and the language of musical note names. And these map onto each other in a very clear and one-to-one manner. It's a rather limited translation system because not all written letters are represented, nor all musical notes for that matter. But if you're lucky enough to have a name that just uses A through H, like Bach or Cage, then you can make music with this system. This piece you're listening to now was written to commemorate the composer John Cage on his death. And the 8 letters Cage dead are translated into the melodic notes, which are rather inappropriately cheerful perhaps, but quite touching, I think. What we are looking at here is the translation of written notes to musical notes. Translation systems preserve information between languages, but few, if any, are perfect. There's very often some loss of information or distortion of information. We'll look at these in the context of 3 musical examples. One way that information might be lost is simply in the identification of the language or the misidentification of it. Here, for example, our bias to hear English can distort information to amusing degrees. Languages and information are carried on some sort of medium, like a book or a CD. The medium itself is rarely neutral and has the potential to distort the information. A piece that embraces it directly is I Am Sitting in a Room by Alvin Lucier. It's been described as one of the most self-contained pieces of art that has ever or could ever exist, which is pretty meta in its own right. Why? Because the instructions of how to perform the piece are the piece itself.
I am sitting in a room.
Words are spoken, instructing the listener
The same one you are in
to
now.
play those words again in a room,
The
re-record them, play them again in the same room, and on and on, till eventually those words turn from meaningful language
frequencies
to just rhythmic information, and then melt into the resonance of the room itself. This can be done on any medium, in fact. Someone has done a similar experiment by uploading and re-uploading a YouTube video until the compression algorithm becomes the overriding material.
I'm sitting in a room different from the one I'm in now.
One must also remember that although translation systems aim to get as close as possible to the original meaning, languages are often mismatched with only close or sometimes missing equivalents. One project, Google Translate Sings, translates the lyrics of well-known tunes through several languages in Google Translate and back again to English, and one can hear and enjoy how the original information has become distorted.
Don't care if I insult you. There's a fire, my God! You are weak. You spat in my ear, but I don't care. I don't care! I'm afraid of horses in Finland. I'm a flying person, entertaining and free. Sorry, this is a secret service, but I want you to sing. I am a police officer, and I do not need anything new. I'm afraid of who I am when I'm alive, fight with strangers.
So with this in place, let's return to the German system of cryptogram. If you recall, we have a one-to-one mapping between 8 language letters and 8 note names. This is a rather lossy translation system. There are missing notes of the alphabet and missing chromatic notes. To remedy this, some composers extended the German system to make new mappings from these missing components. They generally use the solfege notes. La is A, Mi is E, but also the German note S, ES, which is an E flat. Rearrange this here into what we'll call the extended German system. You'll notice here that there are a number of ways to get, for example, to the note A. In this case, it's a many-to-one system. There are many, well, 2 letters which will get us 1 note, and in the other direction, 1 to many. This is the sort of thing that can cause those translation distortions and ambiguities. But this extended German system allowed, for example, Schoenberg to embed his own cryptogram into Seraphita, and for Berg to entwine his initials and those of his secret lover into his lyric suite, and Schnittke to reference Brahms. Takamitsu referenced the sea, as in the Oceanic Sea, SEA with the notes E flat, E, A, using the extended German system. Here you hear it in a different key. He used it as a recurring motif. And most famously perhaps, the opening of String Quartet No. 8 by Shostakovich, where his cryptogram DSCH creates a stunningly beautiful and appropriately Russian motif. But while the extended German system allowed some more letters to be translated into notes, it still didn't complete the alphabet. In response, a French system was devised where the complete alphabet was connected to diatonic notes of the scale. That way, every word would have a musical note associated with it. This allowed Ravel to compose the beautiful minuet on the name of Haydn. So the French system translates the complete alphabet, albeit not with cases or punctuation, to 7 or 8 musical notes. Is it possible, however, to have a completely one-to-one relationship between letters and musical notes? When we have a one-to-one relationship where information is preserved in either direction robustly, it's called an isomorphism, an equal shape from the Greek. In fact, this has been done for us. ASCII is an 8-bit system that defines any letter you type on your keyboard, including punctuation and some extra things like deleting. MIDI is also an 8-bit system, from a very low to very high note, capturing everything found on an 88-key piano. Now, all these systems can be readily programmed in software like MaxMSP, if you're a bit of a nerd. So you can simply type and get your musical notes out. With the German system, this won't catch every letter, of course. But we could make the cases different. Or if we use the French system, we'll catch every letter. And with ASCII, every character will be recognized. This is all beautiful and profound, to me at least, but what information do these letters actually carry? We may be able to recognize some repeaty letters, but in general the connection in these systems is quite arbitrary. We might, however, think of a system that operates in this way. If you imagine there are very common letters like E, T, A and O, and less common ones like F, and then very rare ones like Z and Q. Similarly, there are rare notes to use within, let's say, C major. C sharp is extremely rare to find. G is very common. So if we make a rough mapping of letter novelty to note novelty, maybe we can create something which imparts more meaning in the translation process. If we use a system which maps the novelty of written letters to the novelty of notes in a scale, that means if it's an unusual letter like Q, it'll have an unusual note like a C sharp in the key of C major. That means common words should sound like common motifs. Whilst less common words will sound more angular. Ooh, I like that one. So cryptograms may be beautiful, fun, profound, act as a sort of tribute, a meaningful, creative constraint, and many other things, I'm sure. But how much information or meaning is preserved in the translation? We might be able to recognize words like higgledy-piggledy because of the repetition within them. Or if we use the frequency system, we'd recognize ones with unusual letters. But we could carry on, we could encode for phonemes or letter cases, or try and extract further meaning, like whether it's a positive or negative word. Ultimately, this translation system reveals that letters don't contain all the meaning in language. They construct words and sentences which have their own meaning, but there is another layer above them, a sort of feel about the words, a meta layer. The best way to illustrate this, I think, is in Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll, a poem that's made up in large proportion by wholly invented words. Yet somehow these words carry with them a meaning, a feel. Brillig, Lewis Carroll explained later, means 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when you begin broiling things for dinner. Slithy is a portmanteau of slimy and lithe, and so on. Somehow we understand these words even though we have not encountered them before. This poses a great challenge when it comes to translating Jabberwocky. Here it is in French and German. Sometimes the words look similar, and other times the translator reaches out to try and create the same feel of the words within their own language. So how might music capture this meta layer from languages outside itself? And we should remember there's far more to music than just note names. In fact, a translation system exists from letters to rhythms. Morse code, of course, where letters and numbers are translated just with short and long beats. This was used in Delia Derbyshire's BBC newsreel, where she embedded BBC News in Morse code into the piece. Letters, in fact, can and do carry deep information. DNA is constructed of just 4 nucleotide bases, A, C, T, and G for short. The permutation of these in groups of 3 are instructions to build all Earth-based life forms. What's very meta here is that DNA carries both the instruction and is the material upon which those instructions are delivered. Rather like Alvin Lucia's I am sitting in a room. I am sitting in your cells, perhaps. But music is rich in parameters beyond pitch and rhythm. And there's more to life than letters. The Brazilian composer Villa-Lobos, when he moved to New York, was struck by the beauty of the New York skyline and wrote a piece, the New York Skyline Melody. But rather than trying to capture his emotions in the music, like most composers would do, a photograph was taken and laid out in graph paper with time running from left to right and pitch on the vertical axis. And he simply played through this skyline, including the foreground and background, using his harmonic knowledge to fill in other voices. He created a beautiful and intriguing piece where the architectural design is embedded within the music itself. The poet-philosopher Rilke had a similar insight about the opportunity of extracting music from the external world when he noted that the coronal searcher, that's the seam that keeps two parts of your skull together, has a similar look to the groove of a phonograph, a record, and raised the hypothetical question, what would happen if we played a trick on the needle of a record to play this pattern? What sounds would emerge? What feelings? Credulity, fear, awe, and which of these prevents me from naming this primal sound? In fact, if we look at an electron microscopic image of a record, we can see that it looks rather similar. Now, in 1919, Rilke could only speak of this hypothetically, but when I read this essay, I wanted to find out what it would sound like. And I managed to access a skull from a Victorian woman who would have been living alongside him, and managed to digitally extract the searcher into these sounds you're hearing now. It's as if there's music all around us, so long as we know how to translate it. So full disclosure here, I've been fascinated with this field for some 15 years, maybe much longer, since I was a child. And it's really about the idea that there are shared patterns, characteristics, gestures, meanings between all the arts and sciences, a meta music. Listening to this now, there's a organic mathematics, shall we say. Somehow you know what it looks like or where it comes from. Perhaps the most natural of these sonifications, from the external world to that of music, is of light and colour. Why? Because there's a frequency range to the colour spectrum, just as there is to the audio spectrum. In fact, the reason we have 7 colours of the rainbow, when there are in fact an infinite number, is due to Newton's interest in music. This representation is of his matching of the 7 notes of the major scale to the 7 colours of the rainbow. If you wondered why we've both got indigo and violet, that's why. And these colour scales have been used throughout history. converting colour into music, and vice versa. You guessed it, I've written some software which can read through paintings or videos and play the music within them. I'm going to resist listing the many collaborations I've done across various scientific disciplines, the conversion of the universe into music. Hopefully you get the picture now. Music is an extraordinary art form that has the power to carry multiple lines of meaning and feeling in a way that really gets under our skin and has an immediacy and makes us realize everything we do is music, from the galaxies down to subatomic particles. And somewhere in the middle are little lives, loves, and pains. These are not disconnected, but interwoven melodies in an infinite and beautiful cosmic symphony. Thank you.